Ontario's Regional Chief Isadore Day oversees the national health portfolio for the Assembly of First Nations. He is going to Attawapiskat on Wednesday, but right now he's in studio. So the federal government has set up 2 mental health workers. The province has sent up a team. Your reaction to that kind of response?
Well, obviously, Diana, it's time. There clearly are a number of issues that First Nations face, but when it comes to this rate of suicides, suicide attempts, clearly there's something that needs to be done now.
You referred to Attawapiskat in particular as ground zero. Why?
I refer to Attawapiskat as ground zero because Attawapiskat is one of our remote communities. It has a population of about 2,000. And when you look at the number, 11 people in one night, and prior to that there were more in the previous night, this clearly indicates that there's a problem, and it's getting a lot worse, not just in the sense of the numbers, but the demographics that we're seeing with respect to suicide are younger and older and anywhere in between, and that's a real problem.
You know, it's interesting when this story, broke, for lack of a better word, yesterday, that's what had taken place on the weekend. There were people on Twitter, and I was part of that conversation as well, and people saying, what can we do? What can be done? Because people recognize this is terrible, but don't really understand what could be done to fix it.
Right. So the way I like to look at this, obviously, is when you're dealing with crisis and emergency. This is an emergency situation, and the declaration of emergency that the Chief and Council have put out there are clearly identifying that there's immediate intervention. And when you look at an emergency room, for example, they triage a certain situation. And in this case, I think there's a triage that needs to happen with respect to what's happening in Attawapiskat.
So give me some concrete examples, because I've heard people say today, we need short-term fixes, we need long-term fixes. What's a concrete thing that might make this better?
Well, again, we have the provincial and the federal government here in Ontario. We have 2 Liberal governments that have declared that they're quite prepared to commit to us. I, being a national health portfolio holder and feel strongly about the health of First Nations in Ontario, we're putting all of our efforts and all of our resources that we have on the ground within our administrations forward. So is the government. But you know what? After that, what needs to be done is investment and a sustained approach to not just deal with the immediate impact or situation, but we need to get to the root cause and figure out what's really going on. There's a reason for that, and we'll get to the bottom of it.
I wanted to know about what the AFN is doing. I mean, does it have a quick response team? Because frankly, this is not the only First Nation community struggling with the issue of suicide.
Right. Well, one of the things that we're doing at the Assembly of First Nations is we're looking at the social determinants of health. I have the health portfolio, but I'm a strong believer that there's a health and social policy framework that we need to have in First Nations, because it's not just the primary issue or the health concern that's raised. It's all the things related to quality of life, i.e. running water, social programs, education, economy. These are all things over the past 140 years since the Indian Act was enacted. Tomorrow will be 140 years. Things have turned pretty bad over 140 years.
I mean, it's remarkable. We were talking with our business correspondent earlier about the fact that there's a discussion in Canada today at the CRTC about whether internet is a basic human right. You're talking about Canadian communities where water is still not a given. When people arrive at Attawapiskat, as they are today, how are they likely to be received? Are people going to be cynical, going, great, you're here for a week or two, these problems are systemic?
When people go into a First Nation community in the remote north, people are sadly mistaken, because when you get there, you're treated with kindness, you're treated with compassion, you're welcomed into people's homes, you're fed whatever there is to feed. But basically, First Nations are quite willing and quite prepared. I think people are shocked, though, when they go into the remote north, that there is no running water in many homes. There is overcrowding. There's abject poverty. And there's certainly a situation of a third world condition. And notably, over 100 First Nations in Canada are living in third world conditions today.
You have this systemic problem that exists on this First Nation and many others. We've talked about Pekanjicum, for instance. Certainly, those aren't the only two. And the need to fix this long term. What is being done in the very near term for the people who have attempted to take their own lives, 100 of them in the last 7 months, in this one community?
Right. So what we're doing on a regional level within Ontario is we're being very clear with both the federal and provincial government. You need to take a number of those funding pots that have been identified in terms of investments in the federal government as well as the provincial government. What we need to do is we need to figure out the best possible, most effective and efficient way to make that health economy start to work at the community level. We need to download resources today.
Are you confident that's going to happen? I mean, this is the worst way possible for these stories to get the public consciousness, but do you think you'll be able to hold it and make something happen?
Well, I think we will, but will it actually make an impact right away? It's not going to make an impact right away. I think what we will do is we will give a level of assurance to the community members and the leadership in our remote communities that we're responding, and we will hold government to account, but it will take some time, but we're quite prepared to make a sustained effort.
Chief Day, thanks so much for taking time to come in and talk to us about it. It's important.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. We've been talking with Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief Isadore Day. He was with me in studio.